Lieutenant Sarah Chen stood at attention in General Marcus Blackwood's office, her long black hair neatly braided and pinned according to military regulations. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the command center, casting sharp shadows across the general's stern face. At 28, Sarah had earned her rank through exceptional skill and unwavering dedication. But today she found herself facing the most humiliating moment of her military career. The general's weathered hands gripped a folder containing reports that would seal her fate. His gray eyes, cold as winter steel, fixed on her with disappointment that cut deeper than any blade. Behind him, the American flag hung motionless, a silent witness to the confrontation about to unfold. Lieutenant Chen. General Blackwood's voice carried the weight of authority earned through 30 years of service. Do you know why you're here? Sarah's throat felt dry, but she maintained her composure. Sir, I believe it concerns the incident during last week's training exercise. The incident. Those two words carried the weight of a decision that had saved lives but violated direct orders. During a routine training mission, Sarah had discovered that the designated route would lead her squad directly through an area where a gas leak had created dangerous conditions. Without waiting for permission, she had redirected her team, potentially saving them from serious injury, or worse. General Blackwood opened the folder and began reading. Insubordination. Failure to follow direct orders. Endangering mission objectives. His voice grew harder with each charge. These are serious accusations, Lieutenant. Sarah's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. Sir, with respect, my actions saved lives. The gas leak was confirmed by the environmental team 2 hours after we changed our route. That's not the point. The general's fist slammed against his desk, causing his coffee cup to rattle. Military discipline exists for a reason. When soldiers start making their own decisions in the field, chaos follows. People die. The silence that followed felt heavy and oppressive. Sarah had known this moment would come ever since she made her choice. She had weighed the consequences and decided that her soldiers' safety mattered more than following orders blindly. Now she would face whatever punishment awaited her. General Blackwood stood and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. The view showed the training grounds, where hundreds of soldiers prepared for deployment. Each one depended on the chain of command to function properly. Each one needed to trust that orders came from careful planning and experience. You put me in an impossible position, Chen, he said without turning around. Your actions saved lives. But they also undermined everything we stand for. How can I lead if soldiers decide for themselves which orders to follow? Sarah wanted to explain that she had tried to contact command, that the radio interference made communication impossible, that every second of delay could have meant disaster. But she knew explanations would sound like excuses to a man who had built his career on absolute obedience. The general turned back to face her, his decision made. Standard disciplinary action would mean court-martial, demotion, possibly discharge. But the fact remains that your instincts were correct, and lives were saved. He paused, studying her face. So I'm offering you a choice. Sarah's muscles tensed. Choices from commanding officers rarely led to pleasant outcomes. Option 1, General Blackwood continued. We proceed with formal charges. You'll face a military tribunal, and while your heroic actions might be considered, the violation of direct orders will likely end your career. The weight of those words settled over Sarah like a heavy blanket. Her career meant everything to her. She had worked harder than most, proving herself in a field dominated by men who questioned whether women belonged in combat roles. Every promotion had been earned through blood, sweat, and determination. Option 2. The general's voice softened slightly. You accept immediate punishment, here and now. No formal charges, no court-martial, no permanent mark on your record. Sarah's mind raced. It sounded too good to be true, which meant there had to be a catch. What kind of punishment, sir? General Blackwood walked to his desk and opened a drawer. From it, he withdrew a pair of military-issued scissors, their steel blades glinting in the morning light. Sarah's stomach dropped as she realized what he intended. Your hair, Lieutenant. Military regulations state that female personnel may maintain longer hair, provided it meets grooming standards. You've worn yours long since you enlisted, haven't you? Sarah's hand instinctively moved toward her hair. She had grown it long since childhood, and even in the military, she had been allowed to keep it as long as it remained properly secured. It was one of the few connections she maintained to her life before the service, a small piece of femininity in a world of harsh masculinity. "You want to cut my hair?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not cut," General Blackwood corrected, his expression grim. "Remove it entirely. A complete buzz cut. Shorter than most of the men under my command. It will grow back eventually. But every time you look in the mirror for the next year, you'll remember the importance of following orders." The proposal hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her hair represented more than mere appearance. It was tied to memories of her grandmother braiding it when she was young, of feeling beautiful and confident during rare moments away from base. It was a symbol of the identity she maintained, despite the uniform. But the alternative was career suicide. A court-martial would mean the end of everything she had worked for, everything she had sacrificed. Her family had immigrated to America with nothing, and her success in the military had been their greatest source of pride. Losing her commission would devastate them. General Blackwood set the scissors on his desk within easy reach. "I need your answer now, Lieutenant. The choice is yours." Sarah closed her eyes and thought about her squad members who were alive because of her decision. She thought about PFC Martinez, barely 19 years old, who had written to his mother just that morning. She thought about Sergeant Thompson, who had a baby daughter he had never met. Their lives had been worth the risk she took. Opening her eyes, she looked directly at General Blackwood. "I choose the punishment, sir." The general nodded, though his expression showed no satisfaction. "Very well. Sit in that chair." He gestured toward a simple wooden chair positioned in front of his desk. Sarah walked to the chair on legs that felt unsteady. As she sat down, she began unpinning her hair, letting it fall around her shoulders. The black strands caught the light, flowing like water down her back. She had spent years learning to braid it perfectly, to secure it so that not a single hair would be out of place during inspections. General Blackwood picked up the scissors and moved behind her chair. "This is not something I take pleasure in, Lieutenant. But discipline must be maintained." Sarah stared straight ahead at the flag on the wall, focusing on its red, white, and blue colors to distract herself from what was about to happen. She could hear the general's breathing behind her, could feel his hesitation. The first cut was the worst. She heard the sound of the scissors slicing through her hair, felt the weight disappear from the right side of her head. Long strands fell to the floor around the chair, creating a dark circle on the polished wood. With each subsequent cut, more hair joined the growing pile. Sarah maintained her military bearing, keeping her back straight and her eyes forward. But inside, she felt a piece of herself being stripped away. The general worked methodically, showing no emotion as he reduced her beautiful hair to scattered remnants. When he finished with the scissors, General Blackwood retrieved electric clippers from another drawer. The buzzing sound filled the office as he began the final phase of her punishment. Sarah felt the vibration against her scalp as the last traces of her hair were removed, leaving nothing but stubble behind. 20 minutes after it began, the punishment was complete. Sarah's reflection in the general's window showed a stranger staring back at her. Without her hair, her features appeared sharper, more angular. She looked like a different person entirely. General Blackwood cleaned the clippers and returned them to the drawer. "You're dismissed, Lieutenant. Report to your regular duties tomorrow morning." Sarah stood slowly, feeling lighter in a way that had nothing to do with the missing hair. She bent down and began gathering the scattered strands, though she wasn't sure why. Perhaps it was instinct, or maybe she needed a moment to process what had just happened. "Leave it," General Blackwood said quietly. "Maintenance will handle the cleanup." Sarah straightened and saluted. "Yes, sir. Thank you for the opportunity to continue serving." As she walked toward the door, the general's voice stopped her. "Lieutenant Chen." She turned back to face him. "Sir, what you did out there. It took courage. Real leadership sometimes means making difficult decisions." His eyes met hers directly. Don't let this incident make you second-guess your instincts entirely. Just remember that in the military, we need both courage and discipline. Sarah nodded, understanding the complexity of his message. I will remember, sir. She left the office with her head held high despite her dramatically altered appearance. In the hallway, she passed several soldiers who did double takes, clearly struggling to recognize her. Word would spread quickly about what had happened, and she knew she would face questions, stares, and whispers for days to come. But as she walked back to her quarters, Sarah realized something unexpected. The punishment had been meant to humiliate her, to break her spirit and remind her of her place in the hierarchy. Instead, she felt a strange sense of freedom. The hair that had required daily maintenance, careful styling, and constant attention was gone. In its absence, she discovered something she hadn't expected. She felt stronger somehow, more focused. The person staring back from reflective surfaces wasn't the same Lieutenant Chen who had entered General Blackwood's office that morning. This version looked harder, more determined, more serious. Perhaps this was exactly the transformation she needed. That evening, Sarah sat alone in her quarters, running her hand over her nearly bald scalp. The sensation was strange and unfamiliar, but not entirely unpleasant. She had always prided herself on her appearance, on maintaining femininity within military constraints. Now, stripped of that familiar identity marker, she was forced to confront who she really was underneath. Her phone buzzed with a text from her younger sister asking for photos from her latest assignment. Sarah stared at the device, wondering how to explain her new appearance to family members who had never understood her military choices. They had always worried that the service would change her, make her harder and more distant. Looking at her reflection now, she wondered if they had been right. But as she prepared for sleep that night, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Complete certainty about her path forward. The punishment had been designed to shame her, but instead, it had clarified something important. She was a soldier first. Everything else, second. Her identity wasn't tied to her appearance or others' expectations. It was built on her commitment to protecting the people under her command and serving something greater than herself. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new stares, and undoubtedly new tests of her resolve. But tonight, Lieutenant Sarah Chen fell asleep, knowing she had made the right choice, both in saving her soldiers and in accepting the consequences. The woman who would wake up in the morning would be different from the one who had existed before, transformed not just by the loss of her hair, but by the discovery of her true strength. 3 weeks had passed since General Blackwood administered Sarah's punishment, and the base had slowly adjusted to her dramatically altered appearance. What surprised everyone, including the general himself, was how the incident had transformed Lieutenant Chen in ways nobody anticipated. Rather than breaking her spirit, the humiliation had forged something stronger and more determined. Sarah's performance evaluations had improved dramatically. Her squad training scores reached new heights, and her leadership during exercises became legendary among the younger recruits. Without the distraction of maintaining her appearance, she seemed to have channeled all her energy into becoming an exceptional soldier. The buzz cut that was meant to remind her of shame had instead become a symbol of her dedication. General Blackwood found himself watching Lieutenant Chen more closely than he cared to admit. During morning formation, she stood with perfect posture, her nearly bald head held high with unwavering confidence. The other soldiers had initially whispered and stared, but now, they looked at her with something approaching awe. Her transformation had been so complete that many forgot she had ever looked different. The first sign that something was amiss came during a routine medical examination. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the base's primary physician, had been conducting standard health screenings when she noticed something unusual about Lieutenant Chen's medical history. Cross-referencing previous examinations with current observations, she discovered discrepancies that made her pause and look more carefully. Dr. Walsh was a veteran military physician who had seen everything during her 20 years of service. She had treated injuries from training accidents, diagnosed rare diseases in remote locations, and dealt with medical mysteries that would challenge civilian doctors. But the irregularities in Lieutenant Chen's file presented a puzzle that kept her awake at night. The lieutenant's hormone levels, bone density measurements, and certain physical characteristics didn't align with typical patterns. Additionally, there were gaps in her early medical records that seemed deliberately obscured. Dr. Walsh had initially assumed these were simple administrative errors, but as she investigated further, a disturbing picture began to emerge. After days of careful review, Dr. Walsh made a discovery that would shake the foundation of everything General Blackwood thought he knew about his subordinate. Hidden beneath years of careful documentation and skillful medical management was a secret that Lieutenant Chen had guarded with extraordinary determination. Dr. Walsh requested a private meeting with General Blackwood on a Friday afternoon when the base was quieter than usual. She arrived at his office carrying a thick medical file and wearing an expression that immediately put him on alert. As the base's senior medical officer, she rarely brought concerns directly to his attention unless they were serious. "General, we need to discuss Lieutenant Chen." Dr. Walsh began without preamble as she took a seat across from his desk. General Blackwood looked up from his paperwork, surprised by her grave tone. "Is there a medical issue? Has she been injured?" "Not exactly." Dr. Walsh opened the file and spread several documents across his desk. "I've been reviewing her medical history as part of routine screening, and I've discovered something that requires your immediate attention." The general leaned forward, studying the papers before him. Medical terminology and test results covered the pages, but their significance wasn't immediately clear to his non-medical eye. "I'm going to need you to explain this in terms I can understand, Doctor." Dr. Walsh took a deep breath before continuing. "General, based on my analysis of Lieutenant Chen's medical records, physical examinations, and various test results spanning her entire military career, I have reason to believe that Sarah Chen was born biologically male." The words hit General Blackwood like a physical blow. He stared at Dr. Walsh, certain he had misheard her statement. "That's impossible. Lieutenant Chen has served under my command for 3 years. I would have noticed something. The transition appears to have occurred before her military service began," Dr. Walsh explained carefully. "The medical records show evidence of hormone therapy, surgical procedures, and other treatments that would support this conclusion. Someone went to extraordinary lengths to ensure her service records reflected her current identity." General Blackwood sat back in his chair, his mind racing through every interaction he had ever had with Lieutenant Chen. He thought about her exceptional performance, her dedication to her soldiers, the respect she had earned from her peers. None of it suggested anything unusual about her background. "Are you certain about this?" he asked finally. Dr. Walsh nodded solemnly. "As certain as medical science allows me to be. The evidence is overwhelming when examined comprehensively. What's remarkable is how successfully she has integrated into military life. Her transition was clearly completed before enlistment, and she has served with distinction." The general stood and walked to his window, staring out at the training grounds where he could see Lieutenant Chen leading her squad through combat exercises. Even from a distance, her command presence was evident. The soldiers followed her orders without hesitation, clearly trusting her leadership completely. "Does she know that you know?" General Blackwood asked. "I haven't spoken with her about my findings yet. I felt it was important to inform you first. Given the potential implications for military policy and her continued service." General Blackwood felt a mixture of emotions that he struggled to process. Anger at being deceived warred with admiration for Chen's courage and skill. He thought about the punishment he had administered, the humiliation of cutting her hair, and wondered if it had carried different significance than he realized. "What are the regulations regarding this situation?" he asked. Dr. Walsh consulted another document. "That's complicated, sir. Military policy has evolved significantly in recent years, but Lieutenant Chen's case predates many current guidelines. She enlisted under her current identity with apparently authentic documentation. Legally and medically, she has been recognized as female throughout her service." The general turned back to face Dr. Walsh. "What's your recommendation, Doctor?" "From a medical standpoint, Lieutenant Chen is healthy and fit for duty. Her service record is exemplary, and there's no indication that her background has negatively impacted her performance or the unit's effectiveness. My professional opinion is that this information doesn't change her qualifications as a soldier." General Blackwood appreciated Dr. Walsh's clinical perspective. But he knew the situation was far more complex than medical fitness. Military culture, regulations, and the reactions of other personnel all had to be considered. The decision he made would set a precedent that could affect policy throughout the entire service. That weekend, General Blackwood found himself reviewing Lieutenant Chen's complete service record with new eyes. Her performance evaluations were consistently outstanding. She had received commendations for leadership, bravery, and dedication to her soldiers' welfare. The incident that led to her punishment 3 weeks earlier suddenly took on new dimensions. He remembered how she had accepted the humiliation of having her hair cut without protest or plea for mercy. At the time, he had interpreted her stoicism as military discipline. Now he wondered if she had endured far worse challenges throughout her life and developed strength that most people never needed to find. Monday morning arrived gray and overcast, matching General Blackwood's mood as he prepared to confront Lieutenant Chen about Dr. Walsh's discovery. He had spent the entire weekend wrestling with the implications and his own feelings about the situation. Part of him felt betrayed by the deception, while another part respected the courage it must have taken to serve so successfully while hiding such a significant secret. He called Lieutenant Chen to his office at 0800 hours, the same time slot when he had administered her punishment weeks earlier. As she entered and stood at attention, General Blackwood studied her appearance with new awareness. Her hair had begun growing back, creating a soft fuzz across her scalp that somehow made her features appear even more determined. "Sit down, Lieutenant," he said, his voice carefully neutral. Sarah took the same chair where she had lost her hair, though this time her expression showed curiosity rather than resignation. She had no way of knowing what Dr. Walsh had discovered, or that her carefully guarded secret was about to be exposed. "I've received some information about your background that we need to discuss." General Blackwood began carefully. He watched her face for any sign of recognition or fear, but her expression remained professionally attentive. "Sir, Dr. Walsh has been reviewing your medical records as part of routine screening. Her analysis has raised some questions about your enlistment documentation and personal history." Sarah's composure flickered for just a moment, so briefly that someone who didn't know what to look for might have missed it. But General Blackwood was watching carefully, and he saw the flash of alarm in her eyes before her military training reasserted control. "What kind of questions, sir?" General Blackwood leaned forward, his hands folded on the desk between them. "Lieutenant Chen, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I expect a direct answer. Is there anything about your background or identity that you haven't disclosed during your military service?" The silence that followed stretched for nearly a minute. Sarah stared straight ahead, her jaw set in a hard line. General Blackwood could almost see the calculations running through her mind as she weighed her options. Finally, her shoulders sagged slightly in what might have been relief or resignation. "Yes, sir," she said quietly. "There is something I haven't disclosed. Tell me." Sarah took a deep breath before speaking. "I was born Thomas Chen, sir. I began transitioning when I was 16 years old, completed the process before I turned 18, and enlisted under my correct identity as Sarah Chen. All my documentation reflected my true identity at the time of enlistment." General Blackwood had expected the confirmation, but hearing it spoken aloud still carried impact. He studied the young woman before him, trying to reconcile this revelation with everything he thought he knew about her character and qualifications. "Why didn't you disclose this information when you enlisted?" Sarah met his eyes directly. "Because it wasn't relevant to my ability to serve, sir. I had legally changed my name and gender marker years before joining the military. I completed all medical transitions under civilian care. By every legal and medical standard, I am the person reflected in my service records. But you knew this information could affect your military career if discovered." "Yes, sir. I knew the risks." Sarah's voice grew stronger. "But I also knew I could be an excellent soldier. I wanted to serve my country, and I believed I could do so effectively regardless of my medical history." General Blackwood stood and walked to his window again, needing time to process what he was hearing. Outside, the daily routine of military life continued unchanged. Soldiers trained, equipment was maintained, and the mission proceeded. Nothing about Lieutenant Chen's revelation changed the fact that the base functioned effectively under her leadership. Have you ever felt that hiding this information compromised your service or put others at risk? Never, sir. Sarah replied without hesitation. If anything, my experiences made me more committed to protecting others and proving my worth through actions rather than words. The general turned back to face her. The punishment I administered 3 weeks ago, did it have special significance because of your background? Sarah considered the question carefully. In some ways, yes, sir. My hair had been important to me as a connection to my femininity and personal identity. Losing it was difficult, but it also helped me realize that my value as a soldier and as a person isn't dependent on external appearance. General Blackwood found himself impressed once again by her thoughtfulness and maturity. Even under pressure, she demonstrated the kind of reflective leadership that was rare at any rank. What happens now, Lieutenant? That's your decision to make, sir. I've served to the best of my ability, and will continue to do so as long as I'm allowed. If this revelation ends my career, I'll accept that consequence and be grateful for the opportunity I've had to serve. General Blackwood returned to his desk and sat down. The young woman before him had shown exceptional courage in multiple ways. By living authentically despite social pressure, by serving her country despite potential discovery, and by accepting whatever punishment he might decree. Her integrity and strength were exactly the qualities the military needed in its leaders. Dr. Walsh has made it clear that you're medically fit for duty, and that your service record is exemplary, he said finally. From my perspective, your background doesn't change your qualifications or your value to this unit. Sarah's eyes widened slightly, though she maintained her professional composure. However, General Blackwood continued, this information raises policy questions that extend beyond my authority. I'm going to need to consult with higher command about how to proceed officially. I understand, sir. In the meantime, you'll continue your regular duties. Your squad needs their leader, and I see no reason to disrupt that while administrative questions are resolved. Sarah stood and saluted. Thank you, sir. I won't let you down. As she reached the door, General Blackwood called her name one final time. Lieutenant Chen. Yes, sir. Your courage during that training exercise 3 weeks ago saved lives. Today, I learned that you've been showing a different kind of courage every day since you put on the uniform. Both kinds are valuable in a soldier. See? Sarah's smile was brief but genuine. Thank you, General. That means more than you know. The weeks following Lieutenant Chen's revelation transformed General Blackwood's understanding of leadership, courage, and the true meaning of military service. As he navigated the complex administrative and policy questions raised by her disclosure, he found himself questioning assumptions he had held throughout his 30-year career. The consultation with higher command had been lengthy and complicated. Military policy regarding transgender service members had evolved significantly, but Lieutenant Chen's case presented unique circumstances that didn't fit neatly into existing frameworks. Her transition had occurred entirely before her military service. Her documentation had been legally authentic at the time of enlistment, and her performance record was exemplary. During conference calls with Pentagon officials, legal advisors, and policy specialists, General Blackwood found himself defending Lieutenant Chen with an intensity that surprised him. He emphasized her leadership qualities, her dedication to her soldiers' welfare, and her exceptional service record. When asked about potential unit cohesion issues, he reported honestly that her revelation had not disrupted operations in any measurable way. The other soldiers' reactions had been mixed but largely positive. Some had been surprised, others claimed they had suspected something was different, and a few had expressed discomfort with the situation. However, Lieutenant Chen's leadership abilities and the respect she had earned through her actions carried significant weight with her peers and subordinates. Sergeant Rodriguez, a 15-year veteran who served under Chen's command, had perhaps summed up the prevailing sentiment best. Lieutenant Chen has had our backs since day one. I don't care what she was before she became our leader. What matters is that she's the best officer I've served under, and I'd follow her anywhere. The final decision came down from Washington on a cold Thursday morning in late November. General Blackwood received the official communication just after dawn and immediately called Lieutenant Chen to his office. As she entered, he noticed that her hair had grown enough to require a regulation military cut, creating a neat, professional appearance that somehow emphasized her transformation even more than the buzzed scalp had. "Sit down, Lieutenant," he said, gesturing toward the familiar chair where their most significant conversations had taken place. Sarah took her seat with the composed bearing that had become her trademark. Over the past weeks, as word of her situation had spread through unofficial channels, she had maintained her professionalism and focus despite the scrutiny and speculation. "I've received the official determination regarding your service status," General Blackwood began, holding the printed document that would define her future. Sarah straightened her shoulders and met his eyes directly. "Yes, sir. After extensive review of your case, consultation with legal experts, and evaluation of current military policy, the Department of Defense has determined that your service record will remain intact, and your continued military career will proceed without restriction." The relief that washed over Sarah's face was immediate and profound. She had maintained her composure throughout weeks of uncertainty. But the confirmation that her career would survive this revelation clearly lifted an enormous burden from her shoulders. "Furthermore," General Blackwood continued, "your case has been cited as an example of exemplary service that transcends personal circumstances. The review board specifically noted your leadership abilities, your commitment to your soldiers, and your integrity in handling this situation." "Thank you, sir," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion she struggled to control. General Blackwood set the document aside and leaned back in his chair. "There's something else we need to discuss. Your performance over the past few months, particularly since the incident that led to your punishment, has been exceptional. Your squad's training scores are the highest on base. Your leadership evaluations are outstanding, and you've demonstrated exactly the kind of judgment and courage we need in our officers." Sarah listened carefully, uncertain where this conversation was heading. "I'm recommending you for promotion to captain, effective immediately. Additionally, I'm putting you forward for advanced leadership training that would prepare you for eventual command of your own company." The surprise on Sarah's face was complete. She had hoped to survive the revelation about her background with her career intact, but she had never imagined it might lead to advancement. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll continue to serve with the same dedication and integrity you've shown throughout your career," General Blackwood replied. "The military needs leaders who understand that strength comes in many forms, and that true courage often requires fighting battles that others never see." Sarah stood and saluted. "You have my word, sir. I'll continue to serve to the best of my ability." As she prepared to leave, General Blackwood stopped her with one final observation. "Captain Chen, when I cut your hair that day, I thought I was teaching you about discipline and following orders. Instead, I learned something about leadership that I hadn't understood in 30 years of service." "What's that, sir?" "That sometimes the most important battles are fought not against external enemies, but against our own assumptions and prejudices. You've been fighting and winning that battle every day since you put on the uniform. It's made you a better soldier and a better leader than most people will ever be." Sarah's smile was radiant. "Thank you, General. That means everything to me." 6 months later, Captain Sarah Chen stood before her newly assigned company, addressing them for the first time as their commanding officer. Her hair had grown back to regulation length, styled in a neat military cut that had become her signature look. The soldiers before her represented a cross-section of American youth. Men and women from different backgrounds, races, and experiences, all united by their commitment to serve. As she looked at their faces, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. The scared teenager who had struggled with identity issues seemed like a different person entirely. The young lieutenant who had made a split-second decision to save her soldiers had evolved into a confident leader, ready to take on greater responsibilities. Her opening address to the company was brief but impactful. She spoke about teamwork, dedication, and the importance of looking out for one another. She emphasized that every soldier brought unique strengths to the unit and that their diversity made them more effective, not less. Private Johnson, one of the newest recruits, raised his hand during the question period. "Captain, is it true that you used to have long hair and General Blackwood cut it off as punishment?" Sarah smiled at the question that had become part of base legend. "It's true, Private. I made a decision that saved lives but violated orders, and I accepted the consequences of my actions. Do you regret it?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "I regret that I put General Blackwood in a difficult position, and I learned important lessons about communication and chain of command. But I don't regret saving my soldiers' lives, and I don't regret accepting responsibility for my choices. Another soldier spoke up. Captain, what's the most important thing you want us to know as our new commanding officer? That your value as a soldier isn't determined by where you came from or what challenges you've overcome, Sarah replied. It's determined by your commitment to the mission, your dedication to your teammates, and your willingness to do what's right even when it's difficult. After the formation was dismissed, Sarah walked back to her new office, thinking about how dramatically her life had changed. The punishment that was meant to humiliate her had instead revealed her true strength. The secret that could have ended her career had ultimately led to recognition and advancement. General Blackwood appeared in her doorway, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Mind if I come in, Captain? Of course, sir. Sarah gestured toward the chairs in front of her desk. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, each reflecting on how their relationship had evolved. The rigid hierarchy that had once defined their interactions had given way to mutual respect and understanding. How does it feel to be in command? General Blackwood asked. Terrifying and exciting in equal measure, Sarah admitted. I keep thinking about all the things that could go wrong and all the responsibility I have for these soldiers' development and safety. That's exactly how a good leader should feel, the general observed. Overconfidence is dangerous in our business. Healthy concern for your soldiers' welfare is what makes the difference between a commander and a real leader. Sarah nodded, appreciating his continued guidance. General, may I ask you something? Of course. When you first learned about my background, what was your honest reaction? General Blackwood considered the question carefully. Initially, I felt deceived and questioned whether I could trust my own judgment about people. But then I realized that everything I respected about your character and abilities was still true. Your background didn't change who you are as a soldier or as a person. That fear of being discovered was with me every single day, Sarah confessed. It affected every interaction, every decision about how much of myself to reveal to others. And now I feel free in a way I never have before. I can focus entirely on being the best officer I can be without constantly worrying about protecting a secret. General Blackwood smiled. That freedom shows in your leadership. Your soldiers trust you because you're finally able to be completely authentic with them. As evening approached, Captain Chen completed her first day in command by reviewing personnel files and planning training schedules. The work was demanding but satisfying, and she felt energized by the challenges ahead. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her sister. Saw the promotion announcement in the news. Mom and Dad are so proud. Can't wait to see you in your new uniform when you come home for Christmas. Sarah smiled, thinking about how her family had worried about her military career changing her too much. In many ways, they had been right. The service had transformed her, but not in the ways they had feared. Instead of making her harder and more distant, it had helped her discover reservoirs of strength and compassion she hadn't known she possessed. Late that night, as she prepared for bed in her new quarters, Sarah caught sight of herself in the mirror. The reflection showed a confident woman in military dress. Someone who had earned her position through merit and dedication. Her hair, now grown to a regulation bob, framed features that had been shaped by challenges and strengthened by adversity. The person looking back at her bore little resemblance to the frightened teenager who had once struggled with identity and belonging. That young person's courage in living authentically had laid the foundation for everything that followed. But the journey from there to here had required different kinds of bravery. The courage to serve despite the risk of discovery, the strength to accept punishment with dignity, and the wisdom to turn setbacks into stepping stones toward growth. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to lead and inspire others, and new chances to prove that strength comes in many forms. Captain Sarah Chen fell asleep that night, knowing that she had finally become exactly who she was meant to be. A leader who understood that true courage meant being authentic while serving something greater than yourself. Someone who had learned that the most important victories are often won, not on battlefields, but in the quiet moments, when you choose to keep fighting for what you believe in, regardless of the cost. The general who had once punished her by cutting her hair had ultimately given her a gift more valuable than any commendation: the opportunity to prove that character and capability matter more than conventional expectations, and that sometimes the people who seem most ordinary are actually the most extraordinary of all.